Hello, puppies and kittens. I am talking with fellow activist David Worley from England, and we're going to catch up. We haven't spoken in a couple of years. You've been off grid, have you, or offline, or
Yeah,
whatever?
pretty
Yeah.
much.
Why
Yeah,
was that?
there's so much that's gone on. So the pandemic buggered everything else up. I'm very glad to be talking to you again because you used to feature on my podcast quite a lot, and I always enjoyed our conversations, especially given that just a manner of conversations that you have on a podcast with so many different people. Sometimes somebody comes in and it's just 10 minutes of silence before the broadcast, and you don't know what to say, and it's like there's no chemistry. But with you, it's just so easy. We just spoke for, I think we did like a 2-hour podcast and then just kept talking. Like you had something in 2 hours and you were on another podcast 2 hours after my one, and we just sat there talking until that broadcast happened. So we were there for like 4 hours just shooting the proverbials, you know.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah, I'll go for
well, unfortunately, I can't do that today because today I'm busy. So,
it.
yeah. So you've been offline. You've moved to the country, obviously, and you said you haven't been on Twitter for like 18 months or whatever. So I don't know if it's like you are awakening from a coma and you're saying, "Well, so what's been happening?" Yeah,
Yeah,
well, the last week for me has been bad.
yeah.
I have to make a number of videos about the last week, and I'm already working on on another video that I'm like already immersed and got to finish that before I can jump to the next ones. Our Supreme Court has become the extreme court
Hmm.
and has begun systematically dismantling 50-year precedents. Like all the progress that my country has made is in the last 50 years is now on the chopping block due to religious extremists who lied under oath in order to secure their positions. And yet, it doesn't seem to be
Yeah.
that there is anything we can do about that. Uh, so, yeah,
Well, if I would
there's a
jump
lot
in
going on.
there, I would never lose hope. I mean, you've had such a I was about to say a good run. I mean, it's just as far as I'm aware, it's a blip, and that's the way I view things like Brexit. And people will disagree, but I think it's a blip. It's a step back. It's not permanent. These things can be reversed. They can be changed. It all, you know. It's not as if overnight. I think it's 61% of people that are in favour of having abortions in America. That statistic's exactly the same. So nothing changed there. It will eventually come back in it. There'll be either some challenge to this, or there will be, it might take weeks, months, it might take years, maybe a decade, but you will eventually get there, and it will stay there for 100 years before it gets challenged again.
Yeah, well, it's been pretty frustrating so far, and there's got to be something that stems the tide. We're dealing with people who are absolutely relentless and unreasonable, and that
Yep.
can never concede their position, and only become polite when they lose power. Is a funny thing about how religions are. They're ever so polite when they don't have any power, and the more power they get, the less manners they have, and the more oppressive they become.
Are
So,
you referring to the Anglican Church by any? Are you
well,
meaning
I
to
am
me?
seeing a little bit of a parallel. If you go back, I don't know how many years you would have to go back for a fair comparison. If you had the laws of the UK, and then in one sweeping week, suddenly you have the laws of Ireland, say 20 years ago.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm,
So yeah, we are stepping backwards, and not happy about it at all. And there's so many decisions that there's so many things about my country that are frankly irritating. There are answers that are so screamingly obvious, and I can't get anyone to see them. I mean,
yeah.
how do you do this when you see, you know when you see footsteps, fresh footprints going into a shed, and so that there is someone in the shed, but other people are looking at the same thing and they can't draw that conclusion. I don't know what it is. It just
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I would initially think there's something else motivating them, right? There must be something that is like they know they can see their eyes are working and all the rest of it, but they are motivated in a particular way to act in a particular way, possibly to pander towards other people that are more powerful than them, in some position of authority over them, and as such they don't speak out because there are some sort of consequences to speaking out, and that stigma is something that we're fundamentally fighting. I would say we're fighting it on the left and the right politically. Some people wouldn't go that far. I would, but I think
yeah.
there
Well,
has been a
we
rise
don't
of
have a left.
polarization.
Yeah, we don't have a left here. We have a right who thinks that everybody's left, but we don't have a left. Not here. Pretty much every president we've ever had in my entire lifetime, and I'm old, every president we've had has always been on the authoritarian right quadrant of the political compass. Every one of them. Now, you can say
It's
that Kamala Harris is arguably on the left, but she's not president. She's vice president. It's the closest we've got in a long time. And so the right is always demonizing the left without having the first fucking clue what the left even is. And they see
I
everything in dichotomies. So they want to say that Biden is on the left. No, one of our problems is that Biden is on the right.
yeah, I wouldn't know specifically about sort of the differences, but I certainly know from the Overton window and that sort of thing that America veers right. Your Democrats are more like our conservatives over here because, as has been stated many times, our conservatives introduced gay marriage. Like that's not
so
a
like Bernie
conservative thing to
Sanders,
do.
I don't know why I keep talking over you. It's like I can't hear you. I start to say something and I realize, oh, he's still talking. I apologize.
Oh no, sorry,
I must have done that
delay
like
or
4
something.
times already. Maybe.
No, don't worry about
Maybe.
it.
But like Bernie Sanders, for example, on the European scale, he's more or less centrist, and some people even view him on the right of some things in Europe. But over here, he's considered a radical leftist because you can't be leftist without being a radical leftist. You got to put in the adjective because people have to be scared of it. So that's another thing
Yeah.
I don't understand. I don't understand why the news has to terrify everyone. I try to tell people the way that you recognize propaganda when there's background music to control your emotions. Okay, just give me the facts of the matter. I can make the deductions myself. You don't have to draw me any pictures, but of course, propaganda does, and that's alarming. There's a lot of things that like I know a whole lot of people that if they were to read the Texas Republican Party platform, they wouldn't understand what the hell any of that implies, and I have to explain that to them. I get that. I just wish that when I read something that says, "Oh, they're going to come after Obergefell," well, now I have to explain that means that they're going to try to criminalize gay marriage, and then I have to explain why that's a bad thing. Why taking someone's rights away is a bad thing. Why turning a decent law-abiding citizen into a criminal because of your indefensible religious opinion is a bad thing. It's so hard to explain things like that to religious fundamentalists who just I don't want to be overly bigoted about this, but I just trying to talk to people that this is the response that I seem to get. What's wrong? It's so difficult to try to get through to these people, and unfortunately, I was always naive when I was a little kid. When I remember, like when Nixon was being impeached, and
oh wow,
I remember thinking naively that we elected officials because they were smarter than everybody else and were therefore good leaders.
what a mistake.
That was my foolish. Yeah, that was my foolishness of a child. And I have since discovered that somehow it is the idiots that end up in power. And I've heard other politicians say something like that. Like Michelle Obama said something very similar, that she meets all of these dignitaries and all of this, and political officials and everything, and she says you would be alarmed to know just how incredibly stupid many of these people are. And after having seen a lot of interviews with them, I'm dumbfounded. That just how did you beat anybody in an election? Who the hell elected who elected Louis Gohmert? Who listened to that man? And so, he knows what's up. He represents me. No, this is a moron. This is not somebody who should be pushing a broom in this building, much less holding an office of power. What are you going to do? I'm sure you feel the very same whenever you see a photo. And here we hear from Lawrence, from Boris Johnson, and you see the hair, and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
geez, this guy represents my country. I get
Yeah,
that shame. Just
definitely.
amplify it a whole lot for this side of the pond.
Well, we both stood in local elections where we are, respectively, and I'm happy to say that the council that I used to be running in, which was something like 87% Conservative, I stood down from an election, and the other person won. Well, it was to do with Brexit a bit more than that, but I'm going to claim it was because of me. And since then, they've lost their majority, and it's now like a, what would they call it? Like a hung council. It's not 50% anybody's. So I definitely understand the difficulties with trying to sort of connect with the electorate, but not on your scale. You've got some wacky shit to deal with. I mean, some of these politicians and the slogans that they come up with are just so bland and basic. You'd be more successful at standing there and saying, I'm going to make things better. It'd be like, wow, okay, I'll vote for him. Like,
yeah, going to make things
how?
better
Like,
because
what are you going to do?
yeah, I believe in the Bible, and I cook bacon on the barrel of my machine gun while I'm shooting it. Yeah, Ted Cruz has so little charisma. It's amazing that he ever managed to win an election. I'm trying to figure out how he did, but he has so little charisma that he managed to make bacon seem bad. That's bewildering
This was
to me.
a Bill Maher bit a few weeks ago, I think. I don't know if you still watch or ever watch Bill Maher clips.
I
We
don't.
get
It's
them
not
on
like
YouTube,
I have time to
but,
do television a lot.
yeah, there was one bit he did where he's making fun of Conservatives, and he goes over all the different slogans and all how there's like the formula for these different political adverts, and they're always shooting something they don't like, and it's like I'm gonna like come forward and I'm gonna stand for family values, and I'm gonna be a proper family dad, and
But what does family
it's so
values
fake.
mean? I mean, you've read Orwell, right? Have you?
I've watched Orwell.
I
I'm going to be honest, I haven't read, but yes, I've definitely gone into the whole 1984. I'm aware
didn't
of
think that
Animal Farm
1984.
bits. Yeah,
I didn't think that 1984 was a very good read at all. I mean, it was morbidly depressing. Animal Farm was I thought a lot more illustrative of our situation. Certainly now.
sorry if I could jump in. We read that in like when we're 14, 15. That's something
Okay.
that is read at GCSE. I didn't
Okay,
read
so you
it 'cause I
have
didn't
read
take that
Orwell.
subject, but yeah, for some reason I can't remember ever reading it. It must have been some other group.
Well, there's the
read it,
concept of double
yeah.
speak, right? I mean, there's just naming
Yes.
something the opposite of whatever it is, and we started into that with like George Bush. It was like our 1984 was 2004 roughly, and oh, I'm getting the date wrong on that. But anyway, you come up with a nice friendly name like Homeland Security, but it's really an insidious organization whose who's out to monitor its own populace and export people, apprehend and export people, and that sort of thing. When somebody says in that vein, when somebody says that they're for like family values, that doesn't mean family values. There's nothing in there
No.
that is considered a value. They hate homosexuals. They hate people who are genderqueer. They hate family planning. They want to perpetuate poverty. They want to manipulate women and perpetuate poverty. They don't want there to be sex education. They don't want there to be contraception. They don't want there to be public education. They don't want. What they want is kids making kids, so that we maintain at least 25% of the of children in this state are below the poverty level, and they want to keep that up or keep it growing so that more and more people are poor. And then, of course, you can't have an abortion, just like you can't have contraception, just like you can't have knowledge about how you could have avoided being pregnant in the first place. They teach abstinence only, which against hormonal teenagers is obviously moot, right? That's not going to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so when these kids invariably have kids now, because we haven't armed them at all, we haven't prepared them for this at all. Well, now we've also taken away all of their benefits packages that in my generation they still had. So there's a lot of welfare things. There's a lot of programs they could have turned to, young unwed mothers or whatever for support that they no longer get. So it's just keeping people poor. I don't know if you've noticed, but childless couples, when they're in their 40s and 50s, there's something they have that people with children don't. And the thing that they have that people with children don't is they have money and toys. and they go cool places and do cool things, whereas people with children are financially exhausted. And so
you sound bitter. You sound jealous.
My kids are grown, and I'm over that. That's not what I'm saying. But I had education. I had resources available to me that are not available to the generation now. They're just taking everything away, and they want to make things harder, and they make this harder while also announcing their freedom. Right. And then blaming everything, like Louis Gohmert, I mentioned a little, a week or two ago, he said that we wouldn't have mass shootings if we had prayer in school. Well, now you always had prayer in school.
Yeah.
It's just that teachers couldn't
that's
force their
thing,
religion. Yeah. Teachers were not allowed to force their religion on their students. And as of yesterday, they can again, because our extreme court has decided that it would be a good idea to let teachers force their religious beliefs onto the children of other faiths.
Yeah, it's like that guy who was kneeling at in the middle of the center circle instant. Yeah. That's quite bizarre. We don't have those stories in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, so if you're Native American shaman, you've got to listen to Jesus, and if you're Christian and your teacher happens to be Muslim. And if this football coach happened to be Muslim, which of course he's not going to be because he's an American football coach, but so you're perfectly safe there that he's going to be Christian. He's not going to know a whole lot about nothing else. If he was Muslim, or if say it was a teacher of a different class that was doing this sort of thing, then the ruling would have been entirely different, because the United States is very good about producing funds for faith-based initiatives, like faith-based schools. We're going to fund faith-based schools. And then some Islamic institute says, good, we need those funds for our school. And then suddenly the Christians remember, oh, well, we were supposed to have an establishment clause where we're not supposed to support any particular faith. They don't remember that until it's the Muslims asking for it. As long as they think it's only Christians that are going to apply, well, now they're perfectly safe, because they're all about pushing their Christianity onto everybody else.
And this is another fascinating comparison between the US and the UK and many other countries that have a monarchy, is that we seem to be far more secular than you. but we're not secular by law. I mean,
Yeah,
the
you are.
monarch is the head of the church,
Yeah,
and she signs off all of the bills and
I
laws.
was impressed with how secular Ireland was when I first went there. I mean, okay, so like the Catholic Church runs everything, but I went there for a World Atheist Convention in 2011, and on the same weekend that we were there for that event, there was an American Catholic extremist, militant activist. He calls himself church militant is the thing that he runs. This guy named Michael Voris. He was in Dublin the same weekend, unaware that there was an atheist conference right down the street. And but it was funny to me because he was lamenting how even in Ireland, where he was hoping that this would be like the last bastion of Catholicism, he's interviewing all of these people on the street, and 1 out of 20 believed in God. 1 out of 20. Everybody else was an atheist in a country that the Catholic Church rules everything. Every school is a Catholic school. There's an irony.
Actually, that's another point. I mean, our schools. Whenever I used to work in schools, and I did before the
You be quiet.
I
Somebody
used to work
outside
in
is
schools.
talking.
No, that's fine. Don't worry about it. I used to work in schools for about 8 years before the pandemic, and one of the key things, I would be going to lots of different schools every day. So I'd be doing maybe a breakfast club here and an after school club there. And all of these different schools were typically, one would be Catholic, one would be this. Even when I remember an incident when a child had said, "What the hell?" Just like a general normal phrase in the UK, and I repeated it back to him, like, because he was just being rude, and I was just like, whatever the context was, I had also said those words, and then I got told off, like, to one side by some of the teachers, like, could you not say that? That's offensive. I mean, it's just laughable. Some of them, these situations whereby we had a census last year, and I haven't quite caught up on some of the results. I think some of them are being released soon, and I fully expect us to be half atheist, because I mean, everyone. I remember having prayer in school. I remember that was probably one of my first memories of religion. Was sat there in year 6, and which was like 10 years old, and they always say, like, let us pray, and everyone bows their head, and I'm looking around going, what are you doing? Like, I remember that exact thought. What are you doing? Because it was something that, just, it never even occurred to me to be religious.
Yeah, I think the best way to reduce religion is to encourage it by the government. That seems to be
to
the
expose
way.
it, yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, when you have that shit imposed on people, and my dog is so trying to get to the door because he hears people talking outside, and he wants to bark at them. Don't you? Shut up.
Hello, Fluffy. We've got just on a side note, we've got our own dog now. We've had him for about a month. His name's Archie. He's a small yappy Jack Russell, cross Chihuahua. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Jack Russell Chihuahua.
Yeah, I don't know how that works.
Okay, I'm confused.
He just goes yap whenever I open my door and go down the stairs, and it's like, here's a treat, please shut up. You like me, but it hasn't worked yet.
So you sent me a message about you're doing a project, and I'm just noticing we're like a half hour into this conversation.
Oh yeah, sure.
Mentioned your project, so you shouldn't have opened with hey, so what's been going on? And because things have been going on.
Yeah, actually, I can go into that if you want, because I didn't really answer the question. So so since we last spoke, we had the pandemic, and we were both involved within a particular conference that would go unnamed, but it blew up, and blew up on my podcast, obviously, because I interviewed one of the organizers, and long story short, they attempted to sue me unsuccessfully for about 75 grand. Turns out the lawyer that was in the emails that he had sent me was his mate from down the pub. If you Google his name, you find that they'd done like a tag team debate on God, some sort of anti-theist something or other, and yeah, so that happened. I then got another incident where I was being threatened with being sued, and this is all happening over the pandemic. And majestic Maine, hey buddy.
He terrifies
And
people when they come to the door.
oh, he's harmless. He's
Yeah.
adorable. But yeah, over the course of that pandemic, and when everyone went into sort of lockdown the first time, I ended up writing my first book, because the podcast itself, when I was doing my podcast that you've been on 3 times, that podcast was meant to be me having conversations with lots of different interesting people, and we would just always throw ideas out there, get challenged by the other person, and then hopefully either, you know, I change my mind, you change your mind, we both agree at the end of the day to have another conversation another time. And what we've seen since then has been, to me, quite a lot of people kicking up a fuss about how you can't discuss certain things, and that's been very restrictive on my own mental well-being. And from that came the second book. So these, I should say, this, we're talking about the Fantastic Fallacies book series that's available on Amazon, and the link in the description and all the rest of it. And so when I came to the second book, I wanted to go into how we're wrong. So the first book was always looking at other people, looking at theists, and go look at how wrong they are. But I wanted to really get people to try and think about themselves and their own biases and that sort of thing. And it's very difficult to write that, because you're now trying to essentially come forward to someone and say, hey, this is why you're wrong. And people put up a barrier, and it's very difficult to get into that conversation. Yeah. So once that was at Christmas, just gone. And while all of this sort of suing is happening, this legal stuff, and people generally just being assholes on social media, hence the sort of on and off of Twitter, I sort of stepped back and said, what do I actually enjoy? What do I actually really, you know, properly love about certain aspects of life? And one of the main things is that I get along very well with some of my schoolhood, sort of boyhood school friends, and the humor we have and the way we bounce off of one another in such a genuine free speech absolutist sort of way, where we get to just say anything we want, and the aim is to always make the other person cringe or laugh or whatever it may be. And we were having a gaming night, and we were playing these different adult card games, and I hadn't really come across adult card games before, and I thought they were kind of fun, but I wouldn't play them again. I don't think they're repeatable in some sort of instance. They're just sort of they get stale quite quickly. So I wanted to make my own game just for shits and giggles. I just wanted to make a game which I could just say, hey, I just made a game, and that was it. It wasn't like meant to be important in any way. And when I made this game over the next week or so, it went through various different iterations, came back to the same group of people, and some of the cards weren't written up. I've got about 2/3 of the cards written up. So I was desperately trying to just copy exactly the same text onto each card again and again and again. And I just threw some blank cards over to my friends because we needed a scoring system. So in my head, I was trying to make the most offensive game possible as there's like a counter action to everything that had gone on. And it basically manifested naturally into here's a sex and relationships card game in which we use inches and penises as the scoring system. And it just exploded from there to this, you know, every card has to be named after some kink, some porn category, something just so completely bizarre. But the great thing is, the game that we're now left with makes coherent sense. It's not like we've just thrown a name out there. Like when one of the cards, one of our favorite cards, is the Step Bro card. And for anyone who is aware of memes and just the internet, there's this really sort of stupid theme along these lines within sort of pornography, where there's this some stupid storyline where somebody isn't even stuck. They're under a bed, and the only way is like, what are you doing, Step Bro? And it's like this funny meme where you go, okay, if you get stuck in the game, there's the Step Bro card, and there's all these different little bits that are woven into the game that are references to those sorts of things, and that then manifested into, hey, let's do a Kickstarter. Let's try and see if other people like this as well. And for various different reasons, that's now grown into 3 games in which we're doing various different things. So because of the shipping situation, because of the pandemic, because of all the warehouse problems that we've been having, because of the inflation, because of the war in Ukraine, because of the ruble going up, because of oil prices, shipping has doubled. So to make shipping worth it, I have to
and
ship
somehow this is all
games together.
Somehow this is the whole global inflation thing, global oil prices are somehow all my president's fault.
Oh God,
I didn't
so
realize.
annoying.
Yeah.
I see this all the time, and it's really frustrating how I should explain. Sorry, I should probably go back to before the podcast, because the reason I had the podcast and had you on the 6th podcast I ever did was because I went to America, and I spent 2 summers in America, and I met all these different people, and I was staying in a host family home for a week, and then at the weekend we would travel to some new place, and sometimes it would be 4 hours away. Sometimes I would be doing a 17-hour drive from San Diego up to Corvallis, doing the full length of the I-5 across California and then some in 2 days, just to try and be at this new soccer camp that we were doing. And because of all these different, it was amazing, because they supplied all the cars for us and all the gas card, and it was just like a free roaming. You're never in the same place twice. All of the everything's new, other than the language, which is mostly new, because you have to pick up on certain things, like it's not your shirt, it's your jersey. It's not my boots, it's my cleats. There are certain bits you have to pick up on. But in terms of the experience and the people that I met so many wonderful different characters, and that's what led me to wanting to do this podcast, because I was finally exposed to a pro-life family in Oregon and actors in Portland, and I saw the Milky Way for the first time in it wasn't Grants Pass, it was Lakeview in Oregon. It's 9,000 feet above sea level, and I have all these different little experiences, like living for a week with these sort of taxidermists and the people who run like a bull farm, and there's all these different little moments that I can now start to think, hey, I actually really enjoyed this. I want to interview people. So that's what then led to the podcast, that led to the logical fallacy books, that led to where we are today. So I just wanted to clarify that.
I wanted to comment on one of the things you said, that that it seems that there are things that you can't talk about today. And that's interesting perspective for me, because what I often hear now today, I hear the right telling me that the left are professional victims. And I hear that the left, and I'm sure that there is some truth to that. I hear that the left is talking about how you can't talk about this or that. Okay, I get that to some degree, but when I was growing up, and still even through to this day, the right has always been the professional victims, and they were the ones that, you don't say that because that's irreverent, that's sacrilegious, that's blasphemous. And I'm talking about when I'm a little kid now, that I can't say, well, what about I want to suggest that I was told about overpopulation, and I made the mistake of saying at 11 years old, to somebody in my family. I said, well, maybe people should just control their reproduction and only, every family have only one child instead of 15, and suddenly I'm treated like I'm some kind of Nazi, that I support eugenics or whatever evil, because I suggested that maybe we reduce population growth. That was a forbidden topic that was not allowed to speak about. I wasn't allowed to ask questions about God as a child, because you don't ask questions about God. How dare you ask questions? So it was always the conservatives that were telling me, no, you're not allowed to talk about that. You're not even allowed to ask about that. And now I'm hearing that this is the left's thing. And so it was it was the people on the right. It was the people who were the conservatives were always the one who were. My description for them throughout my youth was easily offended or constantly, perpetually offended. They were offended at everything.
Still are.
And yeah. So I conversely, I mean, I can get angry at injustice, but I'm not going to be. It's hard for me to imagine being offended. Or prohibiting something. Oh no, we're not allowed to speak about that. No, that's never happened with me. Nor have I ever been a victim, at least not in my mindset. I mean, if somebody attacked me, I guess then by technicality, then I was a victim of that attack. But I've never felt like a victim.
No, I've never. I don't like calling myself a victim of anything, because it's like it just seems like I've thrown in the towel. Like even if somebody says you can't talk about something, they don't control my mouth. Like I can still type online. I can still do all these things. I still have free speech. They can block me or whatever it may be. But you are right. These things do need perspective, and it's overwhelmingly the right and the conservatives that is being more authoritarian and more bigoted, and by further definitions, if we're going to push the line, then fascist. And I find that there are certain very specific examples of the left now succumbing to certain methods of trying to achieve activism that I agree with. Okay, I agree that we should be going down the social justice egalitarian route. We should care about groups of people and not just be selfish. I thoroughly understand that, and I think at the minute I take the I mentioned Bill Maher again. He's mentioned he called it capitalism plus. Like you have the NHS bolted on. It's a good idea to be post-war thinking about don't leave anybody behind, and make sure that we have a lower safety net, so where people don't fall below it.
Hold on just a second, please. I'm sorry.
I wasn't sure what that was.
What are you?
Is that a toy? I think it's a dog toy.
I don't even want to describe what that was. That's yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah, I don't even want to describe. Go ahead. I'm going to have to. Somebody went up and opened the door and closed the door, and I don't know what they were closing the door for, but they just opened the door and closed the door, and then there's this noise. And what the hell is this squeaking noise? It's the cat had caught a baby rat, and the rat was not dead, and the rat's trying to get away from the cat. So whoever opened the door didn't notice somehow and closed the door on the rat. So now the head of the rat is inside the house, and they don't. What the hell? There's not even anybody over there. And I go and I see this thing, and I'm traumatized. Because I've had rats as pets. And this is a baby rat. This is adorable. And so now it's in this horrible situation. And on top of it, the door's closed on it, and the cat's on the other side, and the dog's on this side. I'm like, fuck, I don't need this.
You would have thought living at a farmhouse would have more of those sorts of incidents, but it was at my old house where I just woke up at 4 a.m. for no reason. There was like scuffling in. I'd left like a box of chocolates, like a Christmas assortment box of chocolates, open on like some shelf up here, and I'd woken up. It's pitch black, and I couldn't sense it. I just heard this ruffling of sweets, and it was like somebody's like in my house trying to like. It's my dad trying to just take like a hazelnut truffle or something in the middle of the night. He's probably not doing that, right? Let's just turn the light on, and then everything went silent, and I was like, "What's going on?" And it was this little mouse, this little field mouse that got into my room, and it kept coming back, and kept running away. And I found out it was like this tiny little gap at the bottom of my door, and it's because they don't have like a rigid skeleton like ours. It just slips under like a small space. And eventually I did catch it, and I had it on by its tail, and it was like trying to claw itself back and trying to like scratch me and bite me, but eventually just placed it outside the window, and it run down into the gutter. But that's I didn't even realize you had a cat.
Yeah, but it's, you know how you open the door when you have a cat, you open the door to let the cat in or out, and the cat just sits in the doorway to decide, do I want to go out? Do I want to go in? Do I want to go out?
God, yeah.
You know that? Okay. Well,
yeah.
You know, our cat knows it's not supposed to be outside. And so it'll wait. If you go outside to check the mail or whatever, the cat waits at the door. And then as soon as you creak the door open to come back in, it darts through. Because it knows it's got to take that opportunity to fire through. And so we and then if we try to bring it back in, it'll just run up a tree or something. So we just give up. Can't remember every time you open the door that you got to remember to kick this cat in the face to keep it from getting out the door. and this is why, because I don't want the cat going out there and just killing whatever it can find. But
then you have to deal with whatever entrails are stuck in your door.
Yeah, and that was not a pleasant experience. What I just saw.
It must have been its head. Surely, there's no other way.
Yeah, I have the head on this side of the door and the body's on the other side of the door, and whoever had walked through didn't know that if they walked through to go out, to the car or something. So they've gone out of the house. So they open the door, close the door, and in that moment, you have this paraplegic rat that tries to escape the cat to come in the door, and then the door's closed. And I'm like, I don't want to see that.
I can't remember what we were talking about.
I can't either. And unfortunately, nobody will watch this video, so so it won't be a problem. Yeah, my wife was the one that walked out the door and I'm sure she didn't know what she had wrought. I'm sure
send her my best, by the way.
Notice it. What's that?
Yeah, send her my best, because I remember you were both meant to speak at the sort of alternative conference that was being organised before the pandemic. Obviously, ruined that whole.
We're looking at our 13th anniversary this month, and we're going to spend it in a very weird way. I had tried to make lofty plans about where we were going to spend our anniversary and all of that, and just every wonderful romantic thing that I wanted to plan didn't pan out. There's because there was a lot of things getting in the way. But then we ended up invited to be on a paleontological expedition into the Badlands of Wyoming, and that's like not remotely romantic at all.
Oh yeah, of course. Perhaps. Is that the Jeep trip that you were explaining?
That's good, where we're going to spend our 13th anniversary. And you mentioned having seen the Milky Way for the first time while you were in America, and where we will be is so far away from any kind of light pollution that we're going to have and the altitude on top of that. we're going to have
Yeah.
we will see the Milky Way for sure. I mean, well enough
Nice.
that with my wife's camera, if she can adjust the shutter speed, we might be able to take a really good picture of it.
Yeah, I couldn't. That's another thing. I couldn't. iPhone's just not good enough. You've got to.
No, you have
Have a
to
proper
slow
camera.
down. You know, you have to have an old fashioned camera that you can slow the shutter speed down so that it stares blankly and absorbs light, and everything has to be absolutely still for like a minute. But then you can get a good shot of it.
Yeah, it's a shame I couldn't get back out there. I mean, the whole visa situation for America just ruined that scenario. Because now you have to be a student. You can't get H-2B visa anymore for workers that are fulfilling something that America can't find the workers for, kind of thing. But yeah, those experiences were so great, so great. I remember that second year, I was sort of exposed, and I was more ready to be talking about these different topics, because in the gap between those 2 summers, I had come across Atheist Experience, Jacqueline Glenn, all those other sort of names you'd have definitely heard of, and it eventually led to some very interesting, more candid conversations about this sort of thing. I was in Montana. This is one of my favorite stories. When I was out in America, I was with a black lesbian Trump supporter in the middle of nowhere, in like sort of towards the end of the World Cup, the soccer World Cup that was going on, and we would be driving to the field every morning. She'd give us a lift for her and her son, and we'd have half an hour of just these amazing conversations. I mean, I disagreed with her quite a bit, but it exposed me to how to have a conversation with somebody you profoundly disagree with on various different political sort of issues. And it was I mean, that's fascinating. Why? Surely the stereotype would be that is the least likely person demographic to be voting for Trump. That was the main conversation. I didn't want to say it explicitly to her. It's like, this is interesting,
Yeah. So Trump promised, and we were all promised, that if Trump won the election, that he wouldn't do anything to diminish gay rights or women's rights, and that he wasn't a racist and all that. And look what happened already. And we've had murmurings from the Republican Party platform and from justices on the Supreme Court that the worst is yet to come, that they're coming for a lot of your rights. So that gay marriage is going to be criminalized, gay acts are going to be criminalized. Women's bodies have already been largely criminalized. And then also there are, to let you know how bad it is, since you mentioned this person is black, lesbian woman. Okay, so the lesbian, Trump administration and the current
they don't have
Supreme
any
Court,
problems with the lesbians, it seems. Funny that.
Well, as long as they don't get pregnant. But if they're going to try to adopt children, then there's a problem, because they want to, and the Republican Party platform states this now. They've just recently updated it. They state that they want to come for gay rights, all of them. They want homosexuality to be criminalized. The act of homosexuality to be criminalized. So
we're talking
that's
about
something
like
for
Iran, Saudi
what's that?
Arabia, aren't we? Are we talking about the Middle East? Oh no, wait, we're talking about America. Oh,
Yeah,
damn.
yeah, the place
funny.
that we used to call a free country.
Land of
But
the free.
then on the race issue, right? There's even that, because the current Republican Party platform now states that they will not criminalize hate crimes. As a matter of fact, they offer defense for people who commit hate crimes. And I don't remember exactly the way that it's phrased. I'll have to pull it up. But I was alarmed that they're, in a sense, they're actually encouraging hate crimes.
So isn't
literally
there
encouraging that. So they're encouraging people to go out and attack other people because they're Muslim, because they're black, because they're gay, whatever. And there's no such thing as a hate crime anymore, at least according to Republicans.
maybe you could clarify this for me, because I'm sort of a bit sort of shady on the details because it is another country. But isn't there a place, must be Tennessee? No, I don't know, where the punishment for abortion is more than the punishment for the person who raped them.
Yeah, yeah. It's just,
I mean, that's
like,
just mental.
yeah, yeah. Well, there's not a sense of justice in here, and there's no reasoning with these people. They can't even tell what their motivation is. They can't even tell why they're outraged about it. And we know that um, if you, I asked this guy yesterday, I said, if you're the attending doctor and you realize that this is going to be one of those difficult births where it is very likely to kill either the mother or the child, that there's no way that they are both going to survive. And you're in a situation where you can decide which one will live. Which one would you save? And of course, they
The
can't
mother.
answer that question because they know what the
Yeah.
answer is. You're going to save the mother. You know you are. And if you're in a burning building, this is one of those stem cell laboratories, or it's one of those where they have frozen fertilized embryos. So you've got this refrigerator on wheels. It's got 1,000 fertilized embryos, and you've got a baby crib with one sleeping baby that a mother had come in on an errand, and something has happened, and now the mother's dead, but the baby you can save the baby, or you can save the vat of 1,000 fertilized embryos. One or the other you can get out of the fire, but only one. And the question is not which one are you going to save, but what kind of how are you going to treat the baby when you get it out of there? Because everybody knows you're going to save the baby. You're not going to save the 1,000 fertilized embryos. We all know what the moral judgment is on that. But this isn't about a moral judgment. This is about the oppression and manipulation of women. And that's all it is.
Yeah, and this is another hypocrisy of the conservatives, particularly in America, is that they want to save the child, but as soon as the child's alive and has been born, by whatever definition of alive we want to use with these conservatives, but once it's out there, it seems to be disregarded. It doesn't. You would expect a consistent pro-lifer to be in favour of also having free school meals or any of these other little subsidies from the government. No, they don't. They're not in favour of that because they're not actually in favour of it, whether it's that child's life or not. It does at least appear to me from the outside, from the UK, they just want to control women.
Exactly.
And that
they're
seems to
not
be
pro-life. They're pro-birth. And only because it is an inconvenience to the mother. To give an example of how extreme this is, a Republican representative, of course, it's always Republican. The villain in all of our stories, it's always a Republican. Louis Gohmert, again, I don't know how many times I'm going to bring up his name. There was this girl, I think she was underage. I'd have to look it up, but here's like a minor. She couldn't have had given legal consent to be pregnant in the first place. But it's determined that the fetus did not develop a brain when it should have. So she has a non-viable fetus. Now, this is detected early on, so she's not like, grossly distended or whatever. So imagine a minor child having to go through a term pregnancy. A lot of women complain about the damage that is done by going full term on a pregnancy. When a woman chooses the pregnancy, then she's taken the risk. She knows that there's a chance that she could die in the process. She knows the damages. She knows the inconvenience, is the most polite way I can put it, of trying to carry a pregnancy full term. All of that. She's adopted that. She's going to take that on. She understands. But this minor child doesn't have that choice, or shouldn't be forced to make that. And then, they've taken it away because while the thing she should have been denied that, just, regardless, but they're going to force her through it. Louis Gomer, upon learning that she's going to give birth to a brainless baby, something that will be able to perform motor functions such as breathing and heartbeat and stuff like that for maybe weeks at most, and then will inevitably die and can't in any sense live, in any substantive way, right? He demanded that she be forced to carry that child, as he put it, to term. That she needed to go through all of the inconvenience. She needed to go through the emotional and physical trauma of going through, becoming 9 months pregnant and all of that to give birth to something you can't love. It's not there. I mean, sure, it's human cells, it's human DNA. Technically, it's human, but that's not a person. There's no way that could ever be a person. There's no brain. But Republican representative demands, for moral reasons, that she should be forced to go through that. The moral dilemma there is that obviously the moral thing to do would be to terminate that pregnancy before it gets too far. That would be the moral thing. The immoral thing to do is to force her to go through with it. But you can't get a believer to admit that.
And this is exactly the problem with trying to convey these ideas to people who think they genuinely believe that they get their morals from a book that was written by a deity they cannot prove.
And then that doesn't work either, because as I pointed out so many times, the Bible, the book of Numbers, chapter 5, explicitly, it endorses abortion. It forced abortion. You force a woman to undergo an abortion for no better reason than the husband suspects that she might have cheated. The Bible is explicitly clear that if you cause a miscarriage, that is a much lower value, a much lower penalty than if you cause a permanent injury or lose a cost of life.
So this is consistent then, because Republicans, who are typically Christian, and they can believe what they like, but that's what they're enacting in that case. When I mentioned that people have a higher penalty for abortion than they do for the person who raped them, I mean that's where it comes from. These specific ideas, these attitudes towards not just women, but towards what they consider to be moral and just, and they're not demanding evidence for anything. They just it's purely on faith. One of the things I actually wanted to mention with you is there's some wonderful videos of you a few years ago, just before the pandemic, at Speaker's Corner over in London, and the topic that gets brought up is, but you're explaining to this guy who's being mostly very polite. He believed that, I think it was you're explaining to him how morals are basically completely arbitrary, because the only thing that is unforgivable in the Bible is not believing. Like everything else can be forgiven.
Yeah.
Everything, literally everything. Hitler, everything. But if you don't believe, you're going to the same place that Hitler may not even be in, because he could have been forgiven.
Well, he was Catholic. He always identified as Christian, always.
Oh, he would have
publicly
been
and
Pope.
Privately. Yeah, he complained about the Christian hierarchy. He complained about the politics of how Christianity operated in Europe at the time. But he never denied that he was a Christian himself. He never denied that, he never said that he didn't believe that his God existed, or that he always said his God was Jesus. And in everything that he did, he always praised Christianity and never ever contradicted that.
I think it was a Hitchens line that pointed out to me that every German belt buckle had "Gott mit uns," God with us, or whatever it translates as. I mean, if you think, if you could eradicate 6 million Jews, he could have eradicated some writing from a belt buckle, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But then his inspiration for that was also revealed, that although he was Catholic, his primary inspiration for the Kristallnacht, Hitler and a number of other Nazis said, was actually inspired by Martin Luther, the founder of Protestant Christianity, because Martin Luther had published a book called The Jews and Their Lies. And that's what the Nazis were using as their inspiration.
Yeah, it is fascinating how these things, sort of yin and yang, or yin, sorry, and yang, where they flip and flop throughout history, and we seem to be forgetting how these things happen. It does certainly feel like it's building towards another world war. I don't want to like spread fear and whatever, but there just seems to be the West seems to be falling apart, and
my
Russians
hesitation
just
with
getting
that
away
is
with Ukraine, you know.
My hesitation with that is that one of the oldest writings we have is someone complaining about the kids today, and that we have no future because, you know, the kids today are so much different. Well, I mean, everybody said that. Everybody thinks that they're in the end times. And so I'm hesitant to say that. I mean, I do acknowledge there are some severe things that we have never faced before. There are large swaths of the American West that whole cities that are going to have to move because they can't support the water isn't there to support them. And this is an environmental crisis that they're going to have to deal with. There's no water for these millions of people. I used to live in Las Vegas when it was a small town. I mean, it was always this huge tourist trap as far as I remember, but it was a relatively small town, didn't even have a freeway through it. And now that city has blown up, and a bunch of other little towns around it have all blown up, and they're all using Lake Mead as their water source. But now Lake Mead's water level has dropped hundreds of feet, so that it doesn't have the water anymore. You can't put boats on it anymore. It's boatless. It's no longer the tourist event that it used to be. So these are certain realities, and that's just on one scale. On another scale, yes, we've got Putin, who's threatening a world war, and other people who are, you know, threatening to help that along. You know, like supposedly Boris Johnson. I hear all kinds of propaganda about how other leaders of other countries are making this worse, and then we have the potential for a second civil war in this country at the same time as World War III. And then the Republican Party platform again says that we should not have an environmental protection agency. We should allow corporations to do whatever the hell they want to the environment and not give a fuck about endangered species. That's one of the things that's mentioned in there. They don't care about endangered species. So you don't care about the environment at all. You don't care about gay rights at all. Homosexuality is now a crime, according to these people. And everybody else's rights, if you're genderqueer, if you're whatever, if you're anybody that would be marginalized by hate crimes, well, then you're just in further trouble. So, yeah, everything seems to be bad. But I don't want to be alarmist.
No, I don't either. I think, I think there's definitely, as I said at the start, we're always taking steps forward and steps back, and as long as we take more steps forward than we take steps back, then we're making progress. And at the end of the day, it's a good caveat actually going into those games and the card games and the Kickstarter that we mentioned earlier, is that I've very specifically spent a lot of time trying to find the right manufacturer. I could have made it very cheaply in China, and I'm not exaggerating when I say I could make it 5 times cheaper for myself when I can make it out of plastic in China, but I don't want to, because I don't think that's the right thing to do going forwards. And so we eventually, went to all these different countries, and Italy provided a company called Ludo Cards that's in the middle of a UNESCO heritage site. And everything they do is solar powered. Everything they do is made out of recyclable materials. So I know that any product that I'm putting out there is just 100% recyclable, and it makes the whole process for me guilt-free, knowing that I can do something like that. And it doesn't matter how much I make, we know, the trees that we cut down are going to be replaced. And it's just these tiny little details that one person can do to still put something out there. I've probably talked to you before.
Here's
about
another reason to be not
things.
to be alarmist. I mean, just to throw this out, a lot of science fiction movies, the dystopian futures, were made during my lifetime, and I've lived long enough to see a whole lot of them fail. So, like, so the Jetsons and Blade Runner were both supposed to be happening now.
Yeah, we're never very good at time frames, are we?
Yeah, so I mean, there's and the things that they got wrong are so laughable. Like in Blade Runner, we have anti-gravity and we have interstellar travel, but everybody is still reading hard copy newspapers, and everybody still smokes cigarettes.
I wonder if they might have had one or two sponsors to that film.
Yeah, it's like they didn't have cell phones, but we have these like super robots and all of this kind of stuff. But I mean, there are a whole lot of different movies that we could list that were that began like from '87 and Space 1999 and 2001 and so forth, and 2010. All these movies that like put the expiration date on, and then when that date comes and goes, it's not like that at all. All of these predictions failed, every one of them. Every end times prophecy, because the world was supposed to have ended some 60 times since I was in high school, and every one of them has failed. I mean, just people, there are no prophets. There are no fulfilled prophecies. People cannot predict the future. I mean, at best, you can read probabilities, and you can see that, what perhaps you could predict what the market's going to do, but even that's a crapshoot. Just because you have correctly identified which political candidate is going to become president every year since the 70s doesn't mean that Bernie's going to make it this time when you publish that he will, and everybody thinks, oh, he was right all these times, then Bernie's going to be the next president. Nope, because you didn't count on this other thing, that unexpected thing that was unprecedented. So I try not to be alarmist. I try not to try to predict the future.
Yeah, I should throw out there as well. I am getting slowly back into the podcasting and the interviewing. We on the Shills, a channel I think you've been on a few times. We're interviewing every week Operator Starsky, who's a great guy. He's a press officer in Ukraine, and he gives us a weekly update every Thursday. And you're more than welcome to join us, by the way, if you want to. He's a fascinating guy, and it's very sobering every week to sit there and start to, you think throughout the week that you've got problems. Like, you don't. He's describing, what's happening to children and what's happening. There's just recently, like yesterday, 2 days ago, there was a shopping center that was blown up for no reason whatsoever, and other than Putin's ego. And it's very interesting to try and interview the guy, but also provide unique content. So you're not just asking, what's his favorite gun. You're starting to ask, what about your childhood? What's actually being lost in Ukraine? Talk about the culture. He's very much into Eurovision, and he was talking about the culture of sort of what they wear and all of this sort of thing, like the traditional Ukrainian dress. I've forgotten the name of it, but it's white with all the flowers and embroidery, and it's all these little details.
I was a fan of
Ruslana.
Yeah. I was a fan of Ruslana a while back.
Oh, of course you were.
Yeah.
What was her song? Dancing Wolves or something
well,
like
I
that?
I wasn't a fan necessarily of that song, but the one that the one
You're not
Eurovision
listening.
2005. There were some few other songs that she did that I quite, or a few performance videos that she did that I quite liked, and I
Was it
liked
the
there were some
leather?
things about her that I quite liked. How she was an activist for her country, and how she took part in the Orange Revolution, and
Oh yeah.
when the president when there was an assassination attempt against the president of Ukraine, or I want to say it was the president of Ukraine at the time. We're talking about around 2005. And when he survived that assassination attempt, it was apparently there was like a reforming of parliament, and she was assigned a seat on parliament. And I'm like, she's a pop star, and she literally rules, you know. And so you would see the president go give an address, and there's Ruslana standing right behind him to the right. You know, I was very impressed with that. It's not like something that we would ever expect, you know, in America. We wouldn't ever expect Britney Spears to do that sort of thing. So, yeah.
No, unfortunately, the celebrities that go for office in your country are complete morons. But there we are. Yeah.
And I don't know
I,
anything about, I don't really know anything about Ruslana except that she was smoking gorgeous and had great hair. Uh, but she seemed like a nice kid, and she definitely cared about her people. She was an activist against human trafficking, which, of course, when you think of, if you know anything about Ukraine, then you know that
Yeah.
one of their biggest issues is that, you know, they had human trafficking issues, very, very badly, you know, especially back 10 years ago, much worse than it is now. But it's just surprising you mentioned Eurovision. Most Americans wouldn't know fuck all about that. And I happened to be a
Yeah,
Russian
didn't,
language student at the time, so that turned me on to a number of the Russian performers when I was taking Russian language were not Russian, they were Ukrainian. And so in an attempt to study the language, I learned a little bit about the culture there.
yeah, it's very interesting learning the differences between Russia and Ukraine, because I've said this before on some of those streams where I think maybe it's just me, but I think my country as a whole can be very ignorant of the Eastern European bloc, and so we just view them as sort of like Russia light. But the
Yeah,
learning
I remember
all
hearing
of these
somebody say
differences is fascinating.
there was a Republican that said something very much like that, like a week ago. Said it was trying to justify the invasion of Ukraine, saying that they are Russia, they're the same people, they're the same everything, except that
Yeah.
I can listen to two people, and I have. I've listened to there was a duet between Ruslana and Varvara, who's a Russian singer, and they're both singing the same lyrics, but in their different languages, and they are distinctly different. I cannot read Ukrainian. That's not even the same alphabet as Russian Cyrillic. So no, they're not the same.
Yeah, it's like changing Kiev to Kyiv and various different, very similar, but there are distinct differences, and it's quite fun talking to Starsky, because he does make fun of the differences as well. He he he's starting to feel very comfortable with us, and he's now going into more of his background. He was talking about Limp Bizkit, and he was talking about how in his youth he would there were these like two different groups, like I think it was hip hop and metal or something, and they just didn't like each other. And then Limp Bizkit came along, and they sort of, to an extent, united the two groups with a sort of music fusion in Ukraine. And it's like, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because that's how they embraced. He was describing how Ukraine had started to embrace the West, and that's one of the sort of things that came from that, is that they start to realize the similarities between people a lot more. And
one of my favorite bands
yeah.
at the moment is a Ukrainian band. Not that that's always been the case. It sounds like it from what I just said. But one of my favorite bands is Ginger, and they're a metal band. And I want to call them progressive metal, but there's quite a bit of roaring in there. I was going to go see them live right when the war began. And so Ginger had the opportunity not only to escape their war-torn country, but to literally make millions of dollars by doing this music tour with another band called In This Moment that I quite like. and they opted not to. They chose to stay home in the war effort to maintain the humanitarian aspect of the war effort. So they're not even saying that they're there to fight. They're not glorifying the violence. They're doing the hard work of taking care of the women and children in the shelters and such. I'm like, I'm sorry, that's metal. I had to respect that, and consequently,
There's a lot of
because this has
stories
been
like
going on
that.
so long. What's that?
There's a lot of stories like that. Yeah. When I mean, even down to Zelensky himself, the president being offered a way out and chose to stay in his country. And that's
So, what do
very
we hear now?
admirable.
What do we hear now from the Russian propaganda, from Republican propaganda, right wing? We hear that the reason that Putin is invading Ukraine on every front is because he's trying to liberate this one city that he says we're all Russians. That city is reporting otherwise, and now the story has changed that he's attacking Ukraine because Ukraine are Nazis.
I mean, it makes perfect sense that Brits would be sending so much money to Nazis, right?
Yeah, yeah.
He's
I
also said
weep.
that he wouldn't invade. So, I believe the guy.
Yeah, except we knew he was going to do that ever since he took Crimea. Everybody knew what he was going to do. That's why were they trying to amass billions of dollars in military aid before the tanks started lining up on the border? Everybody knew.
Starsky has a story about 2014 as well, because he injured his arm at some point during that time period. One of his mates was to the point where he could easily just leave the military, and he was broken various different ways. I think he might have had, I can't remember the exact injury, but it might have been leg or hip related, and it was quite serious, definite break kind of thing. And within a year, he was back in the gym. He just wanted to come back, and they do seem to have, as Ukrainians, all these little stories, this sense of duty and the sense of purpose, and they seem to have their line. This is what we stand for.
Yeah.
Which is one of the first things that came out of the invasion. I mean, I was sat here watching it at 4 a.m, and it was just like, what? This doesn't happen. This is Europe we're talking about. We've been at peace for so long, and the first thing that came forward was, this is what we stand for. We don't hate Russians. We just want to live on our own terms, have our own liberties and democracy and that sort of thing. And that I've been in some of the little questions I've been asking Starsky is one of them was about his childhood and sweets, and how they have their own Ukrainian sweets, and how the person in charge of the company became president. As you were saying, like all these different people there. So now we've got comedian as president, and we've had Ruslana obviously doing something that these seem to be grounded people. They're not coming out of Eton or something like that, some sort of Bullingdon club like they do in the UK. They're real people, and I was trying to work out a way of trying to get donations from us or whoever to try and buy these sweets for these soldiers, because every time you go to have one, it reminds you of your childhood, what you're fighting for, kind of thing. Does that make sense? It's just steeped in tradition and their culture that they're losing.
It's funny. I mean, I don't know why I happen to be wearing a Jeep shirt today. I mean, I had in my hand. I started to put on my ginger shirt, which is it's a peace sign in Ukrainian colors, and on the back it's ginger, and it says we want our country back. I started to put that shirt on, and so, well, I've never worn the Jeep shirt on a video. I'll grab that one. But yeah, I'm gonna have to we're gonna have to go. I have
Oh, sure, yeah,
my other projects that I have to get to. I'm glad to have this a bit of catching up with you. I will
definitely.
put the link below for your project for your game. And
Yep, sure thing. Thank you. I'll if I can quickly just throw out some key details. It launches July 1st. We have a day one offer, which is the best offer that I can give. It's basically wholesale price.
I'm
It's
going to
as cheap as
suggest
I
that you
can
play this
possibly make
game.
it.
Have somebody film you playing this game, and then just like edit clips together so that it looks like so that people can see you playing the game. And
Yeah, we've done it.
if,
It's up.
okay, good.
Past.
So then
Yeah,
you've
that's
got a
fine.
commercial of some kind that you can show.
Yeah, definitely. So I've got the main Kickstarter video. When people click the link and they get onto the Kickstarter page, it's about a 4-minute video that shows everything with my audio and all of that. And then there's also gameplay videos, which I only just managed to get in time. I just made them about 3 days before launch, and that's there's like a 2-minute video because we've only got the prototypes for the smaller game and the bigger original game. Third game we don't have a prototype for, but there's definitely 2 gameplay videos. There's 2-minute and 10-minute videos there, and then we have 3 rules videos for all 3 games, and that's on the YouTube link that you could find on the link tree below.
Okay. Well, David Worley, welcome back to the realm of podcasting. Let me know how all of that works. This guy that you're talking to from Ukraine does sound interesting. You know, you're welcome to invite me back on the show if there's something we can talk about and stay a little bit more focused than we did today.
You know what? It's
But
always a pleasure just to jump around different topics because that brings out the authentic. You know, people probably are noticing how this is just completely natural. We're not running off of a script. This is just us, top of our head. That's the best podcast to have.
All right. Well, like I said, I've got a deadline I've got to jump to, so I'm going to have to get to that. Thank you, David
Sure
Worley,
thing.
and best of luck with your project, with your podcast, with your game, and so forth. Best of luck, Ukraine, and all of and everybody else.
Yeah,
All right.
absolutely.